Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amit Harari, and coming up in today's newscast, foreign ministers of 5 major countries opposing Israel's security cabinet approvals in Judea and Samaria. Meantime, Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen flying to Ankara to meet with Turkish President Erdogan in one of the country's most challenging times. And ILTV's live from Jerusalem at the 2023 Our Crowd Global Investor Summit. Only hours after Israel's announced intention to legalize non-outposts and add 10,000 housing units in Judea and Samaria, the foreign ministries of the US, the UK, France, Germany, and Italy issued a joint condemnation. ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
In Washington, State Department spokesman Ned Price opened his daily briefing with this.
We are deeply troubled by Israel's announcement that it will reportedly advance thousands of settlements and begin a process to retroactively legalize 9 outposts in the West Bank that were previously illegal under Israeli law.
Price said Israel's action runs contrary to U.S. efforts to calm the region.
During his recent trip to Israel, Secretary Blinken was clear that all parties should refrain from actions that heighten tensions and take us further away from peace. Israel's decision on settlements and outposts runs directly contrary to those objectives.
Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich is the driving force for legalizing outposts and expanding settlement activity in Judea and Samaria. He said the U.S. criticism is just a difference of opinion between friends.
הממשל הנוכחי יודע שהממשלה הזו כממשלת ימין מחויבת להתיישבות, בבנייה, בפיתוח, בהסדרה. הדברים ייעשו, ואני משוכנע ששוב, מותר שיהיו מחלוקות גם בין ידידים, כפי שיש בינינו לבין האמריקאים, אבל בסופו של דבר אנחנו עושים את מה שטוב ונכון לנו, והם מבינים את זה וכך זה יימשך.
Most of the foreign ministers had already condemned the Israeli announcement individually, so Tuesday's statement appeared to represent an attempt to drive home the extent of their frustration with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hardline government. The top foreign ministers announced that they were deeply troubled by Israel's unilateral action, which exacerbated tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir told the Americans and Europeans to stop worrying.
ארץ ישראל שייכת לעם ישראל. זאת החלטתנו. אני אומר לאמריקאים, לאירופאים, תפסיקו להיות מודאגים. זו המשימה שלנו, זו התפיסה שלנו. 9 יישובים זה יפה, אבל זה עדיין לא מספיק, אנחנו רוצים הרבה יותר.
In a continuing effort to reach a compromise on judicial reform, President Yitzhak Herzog last night held separate talks with key parties in the dispute. Herzog first hosted Knesset Law Committee Chair Simcha Rotman before meeting opposition leaders Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz. Rotman canceled the planned committee session in order to meet with Herzog. In recent days, Rotman has steamrolled the early parts of the judicial overhaul proposal through the committee refusing to pause the effort amid attempts to find a compromise. Some of the relevant legislation is expected to come up for the first vote in the Knesset plenum next week. Following each of the 3 meetings, the president's office released an identical statement saying that he and the lawmakers had discussed the president's plan as presented in his address to the nation. 3 border police companies will be mobilized to operate in eastern Jerusalem due to the uptick in violence in the city. ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
More border police are to be deployed in Jerusalem. That was the decision announced by the Prime Minister's office and the Jerusalem municipality. The plan includes steps to reinforce security forces around the Israeli capital with a focus on intelligence and operative efforts in the area. Plans also call to fortify 300 bus stops in the capital with budget provided by the Prime Minister's office. The decision to step up security comes after last Friday's deadly car ramming at a bus stop in Ramot that killed 3 Israeli civilians, and a day after border police officer Asil Sued was killed in a stabbing attack on a bus near the checkpoint at the entrance to the Shuafat refugee camp. Prime Minister Netanyahu issued a statement saying that the sense of security must be restored to the citizens of Israel and vowed to crack down on terrorists with full force. Other security measures are reportedly being considered, including seizing assets of terrorist families, security checkpoints between Jewish and Arab neighborhoods in the city, and a crackdown on online incitement.
The mass protests in recent weeks, as well as the recent changes in government and the expected judicial overhaul, having its effect on the Israeli economy. And with us now to elaborate is economic consumer behavior expert, Assistant Professor Vili Abraham. Hi, Vili. So The Economist ranked Israel as the fourth best performing economy in 2022 among OECD countries. And in 2020, Israel ranked 19th among the economies in the world, making the top 20 for the first time in history. So why is everyone freaking out so much? What's about to happen?
Well, investors are freaking out, especially in the high-tech sectors, because a lot of companies have withdrawn money from Israeli banks. And this is one of the reasons why, until today, the stock market has decreased. If you look at shares, held by the big banks like Bank Leumi, Bank Poalim. So companies have withdrawn 780 million shekels, and they have withheld about 2.2 billion shekels from coming into the country and actually from depositing it in banks. So banks are really panicking, because the more investors will withdraw money from the banks, this will bring down the value of their shares.
Now, as you said, many investors look at Israel today and ask themselves, why is this reform so different from everything we had up to now? That's really pushing investors and companies to leave here and take their big money with them? I mean, the legal system has always gradually evolved and changed over Israel's 75 years of existence.
Yeah, well, the thing is that investors are concerned that the new reform will lead to a lot of instability, which we do see that is developing. And the other thing is that they're concerned that a lot of the foreign direct investment that we have seen coming into the country before COVID and during COVID, and now there's a decrease because overall in the high-tech sector, things are not very, the situation is not very good because of supply chain issues, because of the inflation that is infecting the whole world. So they're concerned that this will bring down the investments into the country and therefore lead to a lot of layoffs. Today, the high-tech company hires about 10% of the workforce. It accounts for about 15% of GDP and about 40% of exports.
Now, Israel is considered the high-tech nation, startup nation, and the pace things are going. Do you see it having a real effect on that?
Well, in the short term, we do see that there are effects, as we saw in the stock market and companies withdrawing their money. In the long term, the concern is that this will lead to a decrease in Israel's credit rating, which means that when the government wants to borrow money in order to, sponsor its activities in the country, it will increase the returns. The interest will be much higher. And this means that we customers in Israel or consumers in Israel will have to pay a lot more in the supermarket or a lot more taxes because, the government will have to fill its coffers somehow. And it usually comes from the citizens.